think we're all deplorables, as Hillary said. So screw you.
The people who were most angry about levels of illegal immigration were non-white voters.
One thing Donald Trump said is that you didn't need new laws, you needed a new president. So I'm not sure how much the Prime Minister can do.
We asked Brits what their biggest strength was of America and America's biggest weakness, and one of the top answers for both was Donald Trump.
When America leads, Britain often follows. But UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has led his flailing Labour government down the worst possible path. By branding the insurgent Reform Party's immigration plans racist, he smeared millions of British citizens who are terrified of unchecked illegal migration. Sound familiar? Well, for years, Donald Trump supporters were branded Nazis, deplorables, and even trash. And look where that got the Democrats. But in pressing the panic button is Keir Starmer repeating the mistakes of Hillary, Biden and Kamala. Joining me to discuss all that is political pollster extraordinaire James Johnson and Mark Krikorian, Executive Director of the Centre for Immigration Studies. James, call me old-fashioned. Calling 30 to 40% of the electorate who are currently indicating they could back reform in the United Kingdom a bunch of racists seems quite a bold strategy.
Or the 70% of British voters who want to see immigration come down.
Well, there we go.
And so yes, it is difficult. And of course, Labour, if you put that to Labour, they would say, well, actually, look, this is a very particular policy. We don't think people would support it. We think it's, this is a specific thing. Voters don't hear that. They just see immigration control. Labour thinks you're racist. So it's difficult. All I would say is that Labour's strategy here, that 70% of voters, they might be more interested in the 30%. Because if Labour want to hold on to power, their best bet might be to get all of the Green voters and Lib Dem voters and Corbyn
voters. A coalition of chaos. A rainbow coalition.
A coalition of lefties.
Yes.
Because those people are very scared of Nigel Farage. And actually, Labour can get back into power on just 30% of the vote. So that may be Starmer's calculation. It may not be as crazy as it sounds.
What do you pick up in the polls in the United Kingdom, though, for our sort of readers around the West? Starmer's obviously incredibly unpopular. Nigel Farage is on the surge. How solid is that Farage surge, or is it a gamble that Labour are taking now that if they start throwing some real punches, they might be able to strip back some of that support?
I think it's very real. I mean, what happened at the local elections last year shows this is not just a polling bump.
Yeah.
Reform were the first party ever, apart from Labour and the Conservatives and the old Liberals of David Lloyd George and Henry Asquith, to win the local elections in the UK. That is remarkable. So it's definitely real. It is difficult, though, being frontrunner, and Farage is going to have to be frontrunner for the next 4 years.
Yes.
And I think the most important thing for him is not to worry about Starmer's attacks, but to worry about attacks from within. Infighting tends to follow Nigel Farage around. If he can keep his party together and look convincing and look like he's got answers on the economy, answers on immigration, answers on the NHS, then he may well he could very much well do it.
Mark, in the United States, Donald Trump seems to turn sort of allegations of being trash or deplorable or racist into a sort of campaigning talking point. But he turned up in a trash truck, did he not? Is there a way that this would backfire generally? Well, it seemed it did on Trump. But what would be your advice to anyone branded racist just for purely talking about immigration?
At this point, the accusation has become kind of a joke, really. I mean, it's like calling people fascists, or even like calling somebody a witch or a heretic. I mean, it doesn't...
These words have lost all meaning.
Yeah, they've lost all meaning, exactly. And what they do is like what you were suggesting the Prime Minister's rhetoric does, is basically say, okay, well, you think we're all deplorables, as Hillary said. So screw you, pardon my language. I mean, this is not a way to get elected. And Trump is basically the 2x4 the public took to the head of the leadership class because they wouldn't respond to this issue that was just sitting there on the ground for any politician to pick up, and they wouldn't do it.
I mean, what voters also want is results as well. Labour have talked a good game on immigration in the United Kingdom, smash the gangs, stop the boats, we're going to do this and that, but still the illegal migrants come. If you were, if you were advising Labour from an American perspective, if we compare to what Donald Trump has done on the southern border, he has basically ground it down to a complete halt. Capture and release is basically at zero now. It's phenomenal how quickly he did that. That can't have all been sort of vibes and rhetoric. What advice would you give for what Keir Starmer and people in Britain can learn from Donald Trump beyond actually just being quite hardcore.
Well, no, Trump followed up the vibes and rhetoric with actual policies, and you have to do that. The vibes matter, they help. The rhetoric helps dissuade people from coming, but you need to have policy to back it up.
Yeah.
And the key thing they did at the border is stop letting people go, because no one's going to spend all that money and take all that risk if they don't get let go into the United States and they're just in detention. So instead of maybe putting people up in hotels, maybe you put them in detention, regular detention, where they can't just go out and do whatever they want, and then return them as quickly as possible.
James, obviously it's a salient political issue. The last election is going to be a salient political issue in the UK going forward. We're here in DC. Every time we get into this conversation, either on air or otherwise, people can say, what is going on in Britain? This is nuts. You're giving them pre-charged debit cards. You're putting them in 4-star hotels. The amount of migrant-related crimes in local communities are driving a wedge down the middle of the country. People are taking to the streets. Not all of them Tommy Robinson supporters or racists, good salt of the earth folk have had enough of this. They're spraying roundabouts. They're painting their houses with Union Jacks. The political class seem completely late to the prom on this one, right?
Everything you just said, Harry, might be what Americans say, but you also could have lifted that from a British voter focus group.
Which you do regularly.
Which I do regularly, and the British voters feel like that. They can't get their head around it. They can't get their head around why there's not a common sense approach to this. Now, obviously, the difficulty is that US has a land border, UK has a sea border. It's a bit more difficult. There's a France to contend with.
Yeah, I don't know. I love this debate. Is it harder? I'll get a quick thought from both of you, then we'll go back to James. Is it harder to police an island than an open border?
You wouldn't think, and I used to think that, of course, it would be easier to have a maritime border,
Yeah, you'd think.
but it's not.
Yeah.
Because you can build a wall. It's hard to get over. You grab people as soon as they come. If people are coming by water, the boat falls apart. What are you going to let them drown?
Leaving them drowning in the channel is not an issue. James, how far do you think the government have fallen on this issue? Will they ever be able to pull these voters back? Have people just given up on them and thought, you guys, look, we're giving you a chance. Tories messed it up. Labour messed it up. Let's spin the wheel.
I mean, on immigration, it's done, I think. I can't see people really trusting Labour on immigration again. I don't think they did when they elected them, to be honest. I think they trusted them on the NHS. I think they thought this is better than Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives, but they weren't exactly going in with high expectations. So look, I think they are in real trouble. Like I say, their best bet now is what Labour's lines are at this conference, which is it's us or Farage. Try and rally the left around them. That is not going to be nice listening for anyone who's in the middle in British politics and wants immigration controls or thinks Nigel Farage is actually a reasonable guy. But for those people who are, more like the Corbynistas that Keir Starmer needs on board, it may well resonate. Just one very quick thing on the racist accusation. That will be particularly baffling to the number of non-white people in the UK who are also angry with immigration.
Yeah, especially illegal immigration. It's because there's a lot of people who, first, second generation, third generation immigrants whose parents came to this country or their grandparents came to the country completely legally and have played by the rules and have assimilated into British society and American society, especially American society actually. And it's actually the unfairness, it's the queue jumping of the illegal migration that is so toxic, right?
Yeah, I mean, you will have seen this in your work. I was in the swing states just before the election last year, and the people who were most angry about levels of illegal immigration were non-white voters who came there themselves and done it the right way.
Which is why you saw a huge shift among black and Hispanic voters. I mean, the blacks were mainly native-born Americans. It's not an immigrant thing. But the shift toward Trump was enormous. I was in some of these counties in South Texas, 95, 97% Hispanic counties. They've been voting for Franklin Roosevelt for 75 years, and they finally realized this is not the Democratic Party they grew up with, and they're shifting to Trump.
And go on, James.
Well, I just say I would not be surprised if some of those non-white voters in the UK who've traditionally voted Labour or left-wing parties also start fraying, and some of them actually backing reform in numbers that we haven't perhaps seen yet.
And that would be a fundamental breaking of the political system in the fact that the politicians have been so late to this, as we said, so late to this issue that actually almost the genie can't be put back in the bottle now. Is there anything that Labour you think can do to turn this around?
Look, if Labour can genuinely stop the boats, then they'll get massive reward
It's
for it.
10,000 in, 3 out at the moment so far. So it's
not looking
exactly good. Yeah.
But same for if Rishi Sunak, when he stood up in 2023 and said, "I'm going to stop the boats," if he he would still be Prime Minister. So there is a potential for results, but it ain't looking like it.
His arms are fairly bound, though, by the European Convention on Human Rights, which he has said he will not leave or not count as leaving. He is a human rights lawyer. We've discussed it at length before, and I've bored on about it before. Is he really the man who loves the human rights sort of infrastructure so much? Is he really the one that can pull the plug on it? You've got the Refugee Convention written for a different age, for a different world, where we were dealing with hundreds of people rather than millions of people moving around. Mark, if you were advising Keir Starmer, obviously within those constraints there are an issue. What would he need to do to really have that sort of Donald Trump effect, to follow up the rhetoric with action? What action could he actually take, given we are an island surrounded by water that could very easily, could get tough, could get deporting?
One thing Donald Trump said is that you didn't need new laws, you needed a new president. So I'm not sure how much the Prime Minister can do, but if he can do anything, you stop putting up illegal migrants in hotels and giving them gift cards. You put them in regular detention where they're basically in jail, but there's a door out. They can always go home, but that is the only way you're going to dissuade people from pouring across the channel, because there's a payoff once they get to Britain.
The El Dorado effect, the golden city on the hill, people come to it. James, on that very note, the government currently announced very out of nowhere that they're going to introduce digital ID cards. Obviously that set off a lot of people. My libertarian instincts deep down, I hate it. But frankly, what options do we have left? The United Kingdom is a hotbed, as America was before, for illegal work. If you don't shut out that illegal black market where people can cross a border and disappear into the black economy, what can you do? And do you think ID cards, A, will work, and B, will there be public consent for them?
Well, I think, as far as I can tell, and people on the left have said this, that actually this kind of already exists in the form of e-visas. So it doesn't actually have much.
You get prints. You get your printer. Except if you arrive on a boat, you could disappear quite quickly.
Right. So I think Labour have looked at the polling, right, and they've said the way that we get support for this digital IDs policy is by linking it to immigration, because people are concerned about immigration. I think what they're really doing it for is that they see, perhaps rightly, huge benefits in terms of public service reform and people being able to have one linked ID across all of these different services. But that is a very different argument, and they're not going out and selling that argument in the way that, for example, Tony Blair, who's been pushing this policy for 20 years, our new Gaza president,
well, indeed, all hail the king of the globalists. Yeah?
He's been making that argument in quite an honest way. I'm not sure that Keir Starmer and the government have. In terms of public concern, look, I think people are more relaxed about this kind of thing than they were 15 years ago.
Exactly my next question. It's not the same great big brother centralised database of incompetent government IT projects where they lose all the data. It's on our phones already.
Everyone knows that they've already given all their data to whether it's Facebook or Twitter, and they know that the government can access all this stuff Apple, anyway.
Everyone,
right, and people are uploading their personal information to AI every day. I'm not sure people are as concerned, but it's a classic example, isn't it? When this issue was polled 2 weeks ago, about 70% of people backed it.
Right.
When this policy was polled last week with the name Keir Starmer attached to it, it dropped to 42%.
Superb.
So,
he is officially now a drag on the ticket.
He may well be.
You've been doing some other polling, James, about President Trump and British and Western views of the president. From where I'm sitting, it looks like, agree with him or not, love him or hate him, he's quite funny. But, he is moving fast and breaking things. He's getting stuff done. He put stuff in his manifesto and then he's delivered on them. How's that landing around the world?
Well, we asked Brits what their biggest strength was of America and America's biggest weakness, and one of the top answers for both was Donald Trump.
Fantastic.
They see him as being someone who is ready to break things, is ready to get things done, but they also think, is his approach costing allies around the world? Is he going to stand by the UK? But there's absolutely no doubt that Brits do respect some of the attributes that Trump has. When you poll voters on Trump in the UK, you get quite negative responses. But when you sit down in focus groups or follow-up questions in a survey and dig into underneath that, they say, I don't like him that much, but I tell you what, he does get things done. I tell you what, he does speak his mind, and that is exactly what they want to see here. So, you know, the name Donald Trump might not be emblazoned across many sort of British living rooms, but on flags, but they do have a feeling of they respect what he stands for.
Mark, we saw that in the election. There was a sort of shy Trump voter. Obviously, James was one of the very few pollsters that called the election correctly.
I thought you were going to say one of the very few shy Trump voters.
Very few shy Trump voters. But two very brief points. Net positive internationally for Trump. Net positive or net negative, and is there a sort of shy Trump voter that kind of likes what he's doing, and so, you know, they might not scream it from the rooftops, but they quite like it?
For the second one, yeah, clearly, obviously, and what that really is the Democrats pushing people away.
Yeah.
There was a cartoon that Elon Musk tweeted where he was standing in the middle, and then the left kept moving.
The Overton window.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and that's what's happening to lots of people. And it's not just immigration; it's the trans issue and everything else. As far as overseas, Americans don't really care, honestly.
All right, good stuff, James, Mark. Thank you for joining us. Fascinating conversation. Don't go anywhere. We're going to pick up all of that and much, much more right after this break. Don't go anywhere.